Hey there, fellow Planeswalkers, it's Steve for Collector Mania, and we're continuing on with our Commander deck tech series for Dominaria. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. We're actually doing a dual commander list. So this is Adeliz the Cinder Wind. So a colorless, a blue and a red, human wizard, flying haste. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, wizards you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. It's also a 2/2. So if you think about it, I mean, this thing comes out right away, starts hitting you for 2 or potentially more depending on what kind of spells you have. And it buffs your entire team later in the game as long as they're wizards. So overall, an amazing card. I really like the addition of a red-blue kind of control burn type deck into the dual commander format. I'm sure that it could have been possible before, but now it's definitely possible. I'm excited to potentially even just build this in real life. I've been playing around with the idea for a while, ever since it was released in the unofficial spoiler from a couple weeks ago at this point. I think it could be the potential replacement for my Geist Saint draft deck. I have been kind of missing that interaction of like tempo, and this definitely seems like a great choice for that. I also love the artwork. I think we just got spoiled yesterday at the artwork, and it looks absolutely amazing. I love the flavor text too, the passionate intensity of the Gitu tempered by the cool insight of Tolarian training. Like that, yeah, that's really cool actually. So anyway, let's break into the deck here. First up, we've got a Curse Catcher. Of course, it's a Merfolk Wizard, and we know exactly what this card does. Fits perfectly into the deck. I mean, really, your opponent has to think about this as soon as it's on the battlefield, because then they've got to potentially pay 1 more for something. So it's just a good slower down, kind of thing. They've got Delver of Secrets, of course, a staple in the format. I mean, you get this guy to flip over, and all of a sudden he's just a huge threat on his own. I mean, Insectal Aberration, so 3/2 flying, early game. Absolutely cannot beat it, really. Grim Lavamancer. Didn't even realize this guy was a wizard until I started doing research for this deck. Am enamored that it is. I love it, of course, because I've been playing it in my Kari Zev deck, so great addition here. I've got Soulscar Mage. Not all of our damage, I mean, pretty much all of our damage is damage based, so like, like lightning bolts, so on and so forth. So having something that when your lightning bolt doesn't potentially kill something, at least it weakens it, is always good. Plus it's got prowess, so double triggers there. Yeah, it's just gonna become a huge threat. Monastery Swiftspear, honorary wizard in my opinion. Wish it was a wizard, but we can't always get what we want. Vexing Devil, just a good burn spell. I mean, really, this thing is rarely a creature. When it is actually great. I mean, it's a 4/3 for 1, so can't really get any better than that. Brawl Chief of Compliance, we've got a ton of instants and sorceries in here, so this guy helps out a lot. Then Harbinger of Tides, I've loved this card since it came out way back when. I guess I shouldn't say way back when, it's only a few years ago, but you know what I mean. Sorcery speed, even like bouncing something isn't bad, and then having the ability to make it flash, so instant speed isn't bad as well, so overall just a good creature. Plus it's a wizard. Then we've got Jace's Friends Jace Friends Prodigy. So this card is banned as a commander in the format, but we do get to utilize it as a creature in the deck, so still pretty good inside the deck. Not as good as a commander, but we'll see what happens here. I love that it flips into the Planeswalker, of course. The +1 is amazing, the -3 is exactly what we want. I mean, basically snapcastering something at sorcery speed. Really, really good. Phantasmal Image, just an all-around amazing clone. I've hit Phyrexian Obliterators, Thragtusk, Restoration Angel. I mean, there's so many good targets for this card. I've got a Storm Chaser Mage, so a blue and a red, 1/3, flying haste, prowess, so everything we want, essentially. Young Pyromancer, of course, tons of instants and sorceries again. Dual Caster Mage, I've killed many people with this card. They go to Lightning Bolt you just for a little bit of damage, and then you Lightning Bolt them back, and then swing at them potentially. Yeah, it's pretty good. Is it Static Caster? So I played this card a lot in Standard. I had a pretty good America deck that was built, I think it was Return to Ravnica and Innistrad or something like that, during that time period. And I had a blast with it. It was just a ton of fun. So I think this card actually works really well in the format. It can solve a lot of threats if you think about like Avengers Zendikar tokens or Goblin tokens or even like Ophiomancer tokens. This card comes in and takes care of that. So good to include, I think. We've got a Ludwig Necro Alchemist, so a colorless, a blue and a red, human wizard, 1/4. At the beginning of each player's end step, that player may draw a card if a player other than you lost life this turn. So, this was my go-to choice for a 1v1 red-blue commander before Adeliz got spoiled, but I think it still has potential, especially because it's got partner on it, and Ludwig's test subject is actually really powerful. So if you pair those two together, I don't know, it may be in contention with this deck, a little bit more control-y, less tempo-y, which isn't necessarily what I like to play. I like more of the tempo style, so I don't know. Think about, if you're looking at red-blue, think about that pairing. I think it could be extremely powerful. But as far as it being in this deck, I think it also works well. I mean, think about it. We're flinging a bunch of burn spells at people. We want to draw extra cards, and a 1/4 blocker is not bad at all. Plus, it's a wizard once again, so it can be buffed, so we can swing with it potentially and do some damage. They've got a Mizium Meddler, so 2 colorless and a blue. Flash, when Mizium Meddler enters the battlefield, you may change the target of target spell or ability to Mizium Meddler. So, if you think about it, like, this solves a lot of problems. Like, you can need to Path of Exile for your commander, or it could potentially steal a buff from something else. I mean, there's so many good applications for this card. The fact that it's instant speed and it's a 1/4, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it's a wizard once again. They've got Nimble Obstructionist, so our Stifle Bird. Cyclist, Stifle something is always good, and it's also just a flash flying 3/1, which is also just good, and it's a wizard in addition to that, so overall amazing. They've got Nivik Cyclops. I've won many games off of this card. I remember I had a Grixis deck as well back in Standard. That was just, spells in this guy essentially, and you just pummel everybody, so your opponent always has to be wary of when you go to attacks and you cast instants and then you swing with this guy, and then yeah, pretty powerful. I've got a Vanillion Click. I've yet to actually own a physical copy of this card. I'm looking forward to potentially buying one for this deck. So, 3/1 flyer that has flash that can potentially either fix your hand or destroy your opponent's hand is really powerful. Then we've got a Wee Dragnauts. So a colorless, a blue, and a red fairy wizard, 1/3 flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery speed spell, Wee Dragnauts gets a +2/+0 until end of turn. So another one of those kind of double buffers. I mean, you play in a lightning bolt, this guy gets +2/+0 plus an additional +1/+1, so it becomes an enormous threat. It's the flying Nivik Cyclops, really. Then we've got Dax Duplicant, so a haste clone that has Dethrone. So if your opponent has a higher life total, think about that. If they have a potential, let's think about a Primeval Titan or something like that. Now you've got a 7/7 Primeval Titan that you could next turn chump block with and get rid of their Primeval Titan with. So yeah, pretty powerful. They've got Dungeon Geist. This card has been a go-to for me forever, really. I mean, even back in Standard, once again with a blue-white tokens build that I had, it works wonders. I mean, it's a 2 colors, 2 blue thing that basically ices something until they remove it. And it's a 3/3 flyer to boot, so you just start swinging with it. They've got Pia and Kira Nalar. I cannot talk about the accolades of this card enough. I mean, it's amazing. 2 colors, 2 red, Human Artificer, 2/2 that has essentially brings in 2 more power with 2 flying Thopters that you can sacrifice to deal 4 damage total at something. Yeah, this card is ridiculous. They've got Soar of Temptation, so 2 colors, 2 blue. Once again, a huge threat that just needs to be answered. You steal their best thing, you have a 2/2 flyer, they need to get rid of this as soon as they can, so we'll see what happens there, especially with all of our counterspells. Then we've got Talrun Sky Summoner. So I've always loved this card in multiplayer. I think this is probably the first time I'm going to try it out in 1v1. I don't know, he could potentially make a good 1v1 commander himself, but we'll see how it goes. Creating 2/2 Drakes is always good, especially with the amount of instants and sorceries we have in here. And they've got a Vincer Shaper Savant, so 2 colors, 2 blue for a boomerang on a body. Yeah, it's always amazing. They've got Crom Ludwig's Opus, so a 3 colorless, blue-red, zombie horror, 4/4 flying haste, which is basically everything we want, and then it has an additional ability whenever an opponent casts his or her second spell each turn, draw a card. So potential card draw there. Don't really count on it though. It's a pretty quick format, so usually people are empty-handed by the time you play something like this. As I was saying with Ludwig earlier, this pair could be really powerful. I did have a deck built around it a long time ago, and it was pretty potent. So I don't know. Think about that if you're going more of a control route. Then for our top end here, we've got the Locus God. So this is
the most expensive creature in our entire deck, and it's only a 1 of 6 drop. So 4 colorless, blue-red, flying, legendary creature God, 4/4. Whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. Pay 4, so 2 colorless, a blue and a red, draw a card, then discard a card. Then it also has when the Locus God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah, this card's ridiculous. It could be a 1v1 commander in my opinion as well. Like, or just, you know, people obviously play it in multiplayer already. So yeah, overall just a powerhouse. I mean, your opponent has to answer this with some kind of exile. Otherwise, it's just going to be a menace for the rest of the game. Breaking into our artifacts here, we've got a Lotus Petal. Of course, we want to make our commander come out as quick as she can, so having something like this that just lowers their mana cost essentially for a turn is great. Then Aether Vial. I think there's enough creatures in here for this to matter. I think there's a total of 27 or something like that, 28 including the commander. It doesn't really matter for Aether Vial though. I think this will be great. I really like the prospect of being able to Aether Vial in your creatures and then hold up your mana for all your instants and sorceries, so we'll see what happens here. Then of course Cloud of Dominus. I automatically thought of this card as soon as I was like, I'm gonna build this 1v1, and it's just like, yeah, I'll turn my commander to a 4/4 Flying Shroud. Yeah, that just sounds ridiculous. Plus, you know, once again, instants and sorceries just buffer, so yeah. Then breaking into our Planeswalkers here, we've got some pretty big threats. I mean, most of these cards can just answer, or, you know, end the game on their own. So, Dak Faden, so a colorless, a blue and a red, 3 loyalty Planeswalker, +1 target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards, so a way to kind of like cycle through our deck. -2 gain control of target artifact is always good, and then -6 we won't even really worry about. We don't generally get there in 1v1 as far as emblems go. So, first 2 abilities are enough for me. I've stolen so many swords with this card. It's a powerhouse. I've got Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and this is just straight up win condition here. So 2 colors, 2 red, +1 exile the top card of your library. If you don't cast it, deals 2 damage to your opponent. Other +1, add 2 red mana. The fact that it has 2 +1s should tell you something. Then it's got a -3, deal 4 damage to target creature, which usually kills pretty much anything you have trouble with. And then -7 when you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to target creature or player. So yeah, this card needs an answer right away, and people generally struggle to answer it because of the amount of modes that it has. I mean, think about it, defends itself, it ramps you into something that can defend it, or it just deals damage to their face. So really, really powerful. I've got Jace the Mind Sculptor, of course, so 2 colors, 2 blue. Everybody knows what this card does. I mean, I love putting the top card of my opponent's library on the bottom when they need it. It's just absolutely amazing. Fate Sealing is ridiculous, and then Brainstorming after that, and even just returning a creature to its owner's hand. Yeah, this card's a boss. Now we're moving on to Ralzarek here, so 2 colors, a blue and a red. This card, once again, I think it definitely hasn't been played by me in 1v1 yet, so I'm going to give it a shot here if I do build this deck. I mean, the -2 is great. Like, deal 3 damage to target creature or player. Like, that potentially will win you the game too. I mean, you just -2 this twice and you've dealt them 6 damage for 4 mana. That's not bad at all. Breaking into our instant speed spells here, we've got a Brute Force, so a Lightning Bolt combat trick essentially, especially with our commander. It's really powerful. Yeah. Flusterstorm, just a good cheap counter. Lightning Bolt, of course. Swan Song, another cheap counter. This one could potentially have a downside, giving them a 2 bird, but when you really need to answer something and you only have 1 mana open, this could work. So then we got a Syncopate, just an overall good counter spell. A Braid, so a little bit of creature removal and artifact removal. Cyclonic Grip, so early game bounce something, late game bounce everything. Is it Charm? I'm excited to play this card in 1v1. I never really found it in my Ludwig deck, so I'm excited to try it out here. I think it'll actually be a little bit better. There's so many good modes on this card. Magma Jet, Mind Swipe, Reality Shift, Remand, of course, Sudden Shock, Trick Bind. I played around between if I wanted Stifle or Trick Bind. I think the split second won over for this deck with Trick Bind. We'll see though. I might just add Stifle into the deck at some point in addition. Unsubstantiate, an absolutely amazing spell. So colorless and a blue, return target spell or creature to its owner's hand. Disallow, like a counter for everything you've wanted to counter.
Electrolyze, just a good way to split up your damage if you have 2 small targets or potentially just want to kill one thing and hit your opponent for 1 and then draw a card. Not bad at all. Cryptic Command, of course, this card is a powerhouse. It always has been. In this format, it's ridiculous. I mean, your opponent goes to swing out at you and potentially kill you, and then you just tap all their creatures, which, you know, you're playing blue. They're probably not going to, but you never know. The Mystic Confluence, the more modern Cryptic Command, in my opinion. This card's bonkers. It is our top end on instant spells, but it definitely is worth it. It does everything you want it to do. Then Bonfire of the Damned, moving into our sorceries here. This is just a good board wipe for the format. I mean, potentially it can even just kill your opponent, and yeah, just getting rid of all the creatures is sometimes enough as well. Then Flame Rift. Mizzium Mortars, so early game spot removal, late game board wipe potentially. Act of Treason, so I love threat and effects. It was hard to make a choice here. I think Act of Treason just, it's easier to cast for us than like something like Karizev's Expertise. That's double red, sometimes that can get a little tricky. But I don't know, we'll see. I may play around with this slot a little bit. Fiery Confluence, this is an amazing card. I think its price reflects it. I mean, I went to go pick up one of these the other day and it had risen like $10 overnight. It was ridiculous. I'm sure it's being played somewhere for something. But yeah, I mean, potentially paying 4 mana to just deal your opponent 6 damage or deal each creature 3 damage, like, there's so many good modes on this card. And then we're breaking into our lands here. We've got a Fairy Conclave. This card, great in 1v1. I mean, just having a 2/1 flyer out of nowhere can usually just win you the game. Then we've got a Ghost Quarter, a little bit of land destruction. Shivan Reef. Spirebluff Canal, fast land. Steam Vents. Sulphur Falls. Swiftwater Cliffs, so a little bit of life gain. Temple of Epiphany, scry action. Volcanic Island, if you can afford it. I definitely won't have a Volcanic Island in my real life copy of this deck, just because they're expensive and I don't know if they're 100% necessary. Wandering Fumarole. Cavern of Souls, of course. We've got tons of wizards in here, so naming wizard is going to be a huge boon for us. And then I believe 13 islands and 13 mountains. So with that, that is the deck tech. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I look forward to doing more Duel Commander. It's a format that I actually really like playing. I know that at Collector Mania we're thinking about running a few more like in between our leagues, like just 1v1 tournaments, because I think, you know, it's just fun to mix it up and then, you know, play something that potentially is like 100 card legacy. I mean, it challenges you as a deck builder really to come up with something that's quick enough or controlling enough to really hold off your opponents, and we're seeing such a resurgence of like burn decks right now that you really have to play around with that like life gain / control, like where, you know, you're not gonna let them kill you, you've got enough board wipes, stuff like that. And I like, you know, going to the challenge of that. If you watched the 1v1 playoffs last time, I was playing Bantu, which is actually a really fun deck to play, but it might be a little bit slow for the format at this point. We'll see. If it ever changes to 30 life points again, I think it's going to be a great commander. Overall, it's a decent commander as long as you're not playing against something that's just that much quicker than you. Anyway, I got off into the weeds there a little bit. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and we will see you guys for the next deck tech.